with South Carolina's basketball program. It's not exactly where you would want it to be this season as far as, hey, we're not completely winning and doing the things that you want to do. I get that. I understand why some Gamecock fans are upset by that. But in the end, Frank Martin's a heck of a basketball coach. So, yeah, there's that too. But I want to talk a little bit about Coach Martin today and some of the stuff that he put out there in his press conference earlier today. And he talked a little bit about, some of the turmoil that they had. And he was talking a little bit here about after the LSU game this season, there was something that happened that was actually a big deal for the program on the front of this season. And Coach Martin talked a little bit about that this morning in his press conference.
First time that we had a full team at practice since December 5th. Okay? And not only is it the first time, but that means that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 practices since December 7th, 6, okay? 5 of which didn't have every player, had 8 guys. So, and your 2 top coaches, however you want to word that, not around. Okay? So I don't know how you guys do business. I can't tell you timelines and how to I'm a math guy. So even if you ask me to write a sentence, it'd be an adventure. All right? But I can tell you my business. It's really hard to coach your team when that's the environment you're dealing with. And then once we regroup, man, I'm just telling you, I didn't have the fight. I couldn't tell you guys that because listen, I grew up in an era where you don't call in sick. I grew up in an era where you answer the bell. I grew up in an era where you got hurt on the field, you didn't lay down. Even if you had no idea what your name was, you figured out a way to get to the sideline, and then you fell down on the sideline and your players hit you so no one knew that you were hurt. That's where I grew up.
Was with that, we were actually talking about it. We were like, why hasn't Frank Martin had his press conference yet? The end of the season press conference. And then, so, Will did some digging and we figured out that, hey, and then the following week they did it. And he talked about the timeline. That's the way he normally has it every season, where he basically takes a little bit of time off, doesn't do player meetings, he said, for at least a week or two, and tries to center himself before getting this ready for the off season. So with that, he's right, because I remember specifically that story of sitting on press row with Will Pelagic. And we kind of looked at each other like, why hasn't Frank Martin had his postseason press conference? And then if you look back at it, that's kind of the way he does it. Martin did talk about the players leaving and the players staying, and that's a big thing for next season. 4 new recruits, not really recruits, 4 transfers coming in. And some of these guys are going to, they've been pretty successful. I like The young man from Murray State. He averaged almost 17 points a game up at Murray State. I know that people are going to tell me, hey, it's an Ohio Valley Conference team. I get that. The young man from Washington, I think that he's going to be pretty good too. But you don't know until they get out there. Coach Martin did talk about players leaving, though, and who's staying.
Yeah, I expect them to be back. I mean, Mitch is one of the things I spoke about before. I have candid conversations with players. I don't. I'm brutally honest with people. I'm brutally honest with you guys, which is kind of used against me sometimes. But I'm brutally honest with you guys. I don't work with mirrors. I don't try to trick people into things. I'm into communication, education. I don't want to be around anybody that tells me what I want to hear. I want people to tell me the truth, and I'm the same way the other way. So it's. I think they're going to be here. I mean, I'm planning on them being here. They're telling me they're going to be here. Their families are telling me they're going to be here. But if for some reason they go home and they change their mind, it's the new world that we're living in. Locally, I think we've got 5 in the transfer portal, if I'm not mistaken. Here's what's crazy. That's in the low end of Power 5 basketball this year. So that's how wacky this environment that we've created. If we end up with 2,000 players in the portal, which I really think we're going to get there, that's like 40% of every roster. That's just to give you an idea. I just read somewhere where there's 2 Power 5 schools where they have 9 in the transfer portal. But at the end of the day, the guys we got in place that are coming back have played a lot for us. They've been very productive for us, and I'm excited for them. And I'm excited to make the connection between that group and the new guys and build it and go from there.
When you really stop and think about it, with the guys that were there and the guys that are coming in and the potential that they have, if you get Keyshawn Bryant back and you get Jermaine Cousinard to come back, and Martin said he's not expecting any other players to exit the program besides the 5 who are in the portal, unless A.J. Lawson decides to enter the draft. Now, I've not seen A.J. Lawson be picked as a top 5 pick or not a top round pick. And in the NBA, that's kind of the way it works. You get guaranteed money if you're a first round pick. Second round pick, not so much. One of the other interesting notes for 7th Woods, Martin said he's still evaluating whether he wants to return for another season or move on professionally. Woods is also recovering from a severe groin injury. If Woods returns to take advantage of the free season, he would not count against the 13 scholarship limit. That's a big deal. That's a big deal as well. So interesting stuff there with Coach Frank Martin. And when you hear that and you hear about what the team was doing, and a lot of the stuff we just didn't know, they went almost a month without the ability of having everybody at practice. Now, think about that for a minute. Now, I know that I've said on the program, you run with what you've got, but the reality is that if you don't have enough players to fully practice, how are you expected to put a good team out there? I mean, I lay that at the feet of the fans who are like, you know what? Frank Martin's this and Frank Martin's that, and I don't like what Frank Martin's doing. And yeah, I'm not with all that. I'm just not. In my opinion, I still think Frank Martin's a great coach. And I think he's going to get it right. But when he says he didn't want to put out there how he was feeling because he didn't want his mother worrying about him down in Miami, I think people need to step off a little bit. The guy's dealt with COVID twice. We've talked about this. Jonathan says, so could the transfer portal be an equalizer? Yes. If you're a South Carolina fan, you want to look at what Clemson does with some of the transfers they get. Elijah Thomas was like an all ACC type player. Was a guy that they could dump the ball down there, and he made a lot of plays for them. I'm not saying that you're going to find Elijah Thomas's all the time, but you can get some good players to come in from the transfer portal. I mean, it can happen. It can happen. Nick Honor was good this year for Clemson. So it's just one thing on top of another, in my opinion. We'll take your calls at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you want to join us here on the Rundown and you want to talk about Coach Frank Martin and the stuff that happened with the basketball team. 6 wins this season. Just saying. Blake says the reality is him and his players he recruited were unable to avoid catching COVID when other teams were. That's fine, but the reality is that COVID's something that touches everybody. You know, it's when COVID first came out, it was like, I don't even know anybody that has it. And then 8 weeks later, it's like, oh, I know somebody who has it. And then for me, a month after that, it's like, oh, great, I've got it. So it's something that affected every team. I just think that people that were trying to sell the whole thing of Frank Martin's forgotten how to coach, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Absolutely ashamed of yourselves. It's not like it's Darren Horn who came here and ran the program into the ground. Remember, when Frank Martin got here, South Carolina was losing games to USC Upstate. And I'm not knocking the Spartans, but when you're South Carolina, the only in-state team you should probably be losing to is Clemson, as far as a Power 5 conference team. They were losing to USC Upstate. Think about that for a minute. And I know the 6-win season stings, but in the end, I think giving Frank Martin at least another year just makes a lot of sense. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. If you want to respond to what Coach Frank Martin said, we're also going to have some comments from a special teams coordinator for the Gamecocks, Pete Limbo, when we come back from our break. He talks about the special team system the Gamecocks are implementing. And I wanted to share some of this with you because, South Carolina, according to ESPN's FPI, is projected to win between 4 and 5 games. I think 5 games is exactly where they're going to end up being. Maybe 6. But to get to that 6, some plays on special teams make a lot of sense. You make some plays there, and then you go from there. And I think a couple of plays there can turn a season around in just a second. Sort of like the whole turnover thing. If you get some more turnovers, just football 101, man. Blake says, how does Frank Martin suddenly look older than Rick Barnes? Well, because he's dealt with COVID twice, sir. Careful. Frank experts say it's possible to get COVID 3 times. Jerome, I don't think Jerome's on board with the Frank Martin stuff. But I ask you, at this juncture, I mean, when did you get off of the Frank Martin train? I'm just being honest. I think that it's almost like a reset button for South Carolina. And I think you have to go with the mentality of last season just didn't happen. I mean, that's kind of the way that it is. It's like when you were dating some crazy person when you were in college or whatever, you had like those 6 weeks where everything was just insane. You hit that reset button. You're like, oh, okay, same thing. I think that's kind of the way you got to look at it. Anyway, we are going to talk some football in a moment, some comments from Coach Pete Limbo and what they're doing as far as implementing players down there on the special team side of the ball. So we'll talk about that. And we've got some other things we're going to get into today here on the Rundown, here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Of course, around the world on the iHeartRadio app, Gamecocks play tonight at LSU. And it's not the same. LSU's not having the typical LSU season. Let's just put that out there. All right. But it's still winning on the road in the SEC is not easy. So we'll kind of preview that series a little bit with South Carolina as they head down to the Bayou to play tonight. Some other comments before we head to break here as the folks following on the Fox Sports Radio page. This is from USC Insider. Gamecocks just said that the spring game for football will be 15,000 fans that can come and not 9,000. Yeah. Well, if you're going to the spring game, there you go. Put 15,000 in the stands. Good stuff there. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have some comments from Coach Pete Limbo, and there's a report of a team that might be wanting to trade for Deshaun Watson. Yeah, you can follow that story. It's on my blog page at foxsportsradio1400.com. I posted that earlier. People are talking about that. My goodness. We'll have more for you here in a moment. You're listening to The Rundown. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. That's funny, Blake. You know, last year was tough, Jerome, but the year before, they were in a spot where they could have possibly made the NIT. If they'd have played in the SEC tournament, you never know, man. Slow down a little bit, brother.
Celebrate Lowe's first annual Spring Fest with the Char-Broil Performance 5-Burner Grill is $249, now $199. And Style Selection 7-piece Pelham Bay Dining Set is $219, now $199. Create a new dining experience this Spring Fest. The festival.
That's funny.
In-store or online. Lowe's, home to any budget, home to any possibility. Dining set offer valid for $5.5, grill offer valid for $4.21. While supplies last, selection varies by location. Patio accessories sold separately. U.S. only.
Welcome back to The Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Around the world in the iHeartRadio app, I'm Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us today. Got some comments from Coach Pete Limbo. He is the special teams coordinator for the Gamecocks, and it's just interesting the way he kind of broke down his strategy when it comes to special teams. I wanted to share that with you folks today. Here are some comments from the special teams coordinator for the Gamecocks.
I really like what we're doing in the building and how we're doing it. I feel like we're building things the right way and really trying to instill a great culture here. That being said, it's going to require some time and patience. And I tell our players about every second or third day that the culture we build will be reflected in how we play on special teams. And so our players, ultimately, when we get out there in September, will demonstrate their true commitment to the culture that we're building by their effort, by their attention to detail, by their commitment to this phase of the game, because this is what requires putting the pro. Those kind of big picture concepts are an important part of this initiative as we try to work together. We have a special team system. It's not the only system. I'm not saying it's the best system, but I do think it's a very comprehensive system, and it's designed to make our players better fundamental football players, more knowledgeable football players in all three phases of the game. So I often show them clips of offense and defense in practice and how that correlates identically to the things that we're teaching them on special teams. The focus has really been building the foundation, making sure that everybody in our meetings is speaking the same language, coaches, grad assistants, players. Our meetings are interactive. I'm often calling on our guys to see if they can speak the language and regurgitate the things that we're talking about conceptually, and do it fast, right? Because we're going to have to make full speed decisions on the field. On the practice field, it's been about competing, finding out who can run, who can hit, trying to evaluate each and every guy on the roster and figuring out where they will fit in. Because at the end of the day, it's like a big matrix, and I have to be in complete cohesion with our offensive and defensive coordinators in terms of how they're utilizing our personnel and where all those guys fit in for us for special.
There you go. Coach Pete Limbo from South Carolina talking about how they're setting up their special teams, which is an area that I think a lot of people forget. We all talk about, hey, this is going to happen with, offense and defense and everything else, but that special teams coordinator is important. So good stuff there. 803-978-1832. Some comments. Jerome says, Frank is honest and maybe a great coach, but it's still hard to watch the last couple of years. Yeah, I can get that. Also, Blake says, when the fans stop showing up, Frank is done. He better be campaigning right now for fans to show up. That's not necessarily true. Look, we've known that Cousinard and Keyshawn Bryant are pretty good players. So I think that, just slow down a little bit, man. Just my opinion. You got to slow down a little bit. We'll move along here. The stuff with Coach Limbo there, some interesting stuff about his philosophy for special teams. You want to call in about that, that's fine. Brandon online says, I hope Ortre Smith has a good year this season. We need some receivers to step up this year. And that's an interesting thing there with the Gamecocks. I think now, foreshadowing what we may see next week, and I'm not just talking about with the Gamecocks, I'm talking about around the country. I think you're going to get to a point where you're going to have a lot of transfers next week, because I think there's going to be a lot of post-spring depth charts that are released, and not everybody's going to take the Mac Jones approach. What I mean by that is that guys aren't going to come and be like, okay, I am I'm the third wideout. I'm supposed to be starting. Yeah, nobody's buying into that. Okay. I think there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to transfer, and you're going to end up with a lot of guys that, are going to be finding new homes. Now, the weird part about this is that, they're not going to get to go. I mean, you'll know a little bit about them from where they were before, but can they work in a system, etc.? I still believe in my heart right now, and this is just something that just from, I don't know, it's just kind of like a bubbling thing within me here. If Dakereon Joyner is not listed as one of those wide receivers, that is a guy that has the opportunity to go out there and make some plays, I think he has to transfer. And that's just my opinion, But this guy was a former Mr. Football and is a heck of an athlete. Now, maybe he's not an SEC caliber quarterback. I get that. But if he can't make that transition, then it's going to be interesting to see if he decides, hey, I want to stay. Does he do the Mac Jones thing? Does he stay there thinking, all right, I'm going to have the opportunity to try and stay here, and I want to be a Gamecock? That's going to be one of the big stories, I think. 803-978-1832, the transfer portal. There's still some great players in the transfer portal, by the way. Darion Kendrick is considered on some boards, if he can get past the stuff that he's got going off the field, it's considered one of the top defensive backs in the country. Where will he go? He's going to end up somewhere. Jerome says Joyner's crazy if he stays and he doesn't start. I agree. This guy was highly touted. Now, he wanted to play quarterback, and I get that. But, sometimes you may not have the talent to do that. But as far as being an athlete goes, he is an SEC caliber athlete. He can get out there and do some things. So I think that's one of the things you got to look at for South Carolina on that front. Now, the spring game coming up too, obviously, they're not going to show us anything in the spring game. You can go out there and look at it. Now, one of the things you can get is if the quarterbacks are in sync with their wide receivers. Meaning, if Luke Doty is out there and he's throwing balls to, let's say, E.J. Jenkins, and they've worked out timing, etc., where Jenkins can make some catches, you can find some stuff like that. Is Doty comfortable back there? Does he have the ability to slow down a little bit and get himself squared away? So that's kind of the things you can look at. Now, obviously, with the 4.25, how's that going to look? You won't get like the full of what that is yet. You probably won't get it in the first game with Eastern Illinois, which is not a very good team. South Carolina should be able to run vanilla everything and win that game handily. So we may not see much until the second game of the season with East Carolina, I think, is the second game. We shall see on that front. But the transfer portal next week, names will be added. Names will be added, I assure you. Jerome with a good point. I respect him for it. Not many guys would stick with their team like he has, but he was a good recruit. He needs to play unless he just wants to get his degree, I think is what he was trying to say. Look, getting your education and not having to pay for it, I'm a big fan of that. Big, huge fan of that. But I just think that the type of player that he was, and the kind of athlete and play, and the way that he played in high school, I mean, to just say, hey, I'm going to come here and play just a little bit, and I'm going to change positions, and then I'm not going to be one of those guys, that would be hard. Be really hard for me. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon. We're right here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Of course, around the world on the iHeartRadio app. I'm going to give you this Deshaun Watson story when we come back. Maybe the trade market is not completely shut down on Deshaun Watson, at least by one report anyway. So we'll get into that when we come back. As always, feel free to join us on the phones, 803-978-1832. This is The Rundown. You're listening to Fox Sports Radio 1400. I understand I'm not bad-mouthing him. You know, somebody was telling me the other day that I've bad-mouthed Joyner, and I'm like, no, I just think that he has the potential to play. And if they don't put him out there, then... And I don't blame the new coaching staff for that either, because, they didn't, they didn't recruit him. I mean, it's just tough, man. Tough when you really stop and look at it when that kind of thing comes about. If you don't understand the hype, Blake, I can't help you. I honestly can't help you. I mean, if you don't think Deshaun Watson's a good quarterback, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do to help you. You don't understand the game of hut, my friend. If you want to talk about Deshaun Watson having issues, I'm fine with that. But, wow. We don't have an FM station right now. I think eventually, all iHeart stations eventually will be on what's called a transmitter. So it'll be on an FM spot eventually. The best thing to do is to download the iHeartRadio app because you can listen in full stereo all the time. So that's just my opinion. He should have, Jerome. That's not that far-fetched. Well, welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. story on Deshaun Watson that came out today from Mike Fisher from SI.com. Now, normally we're talking about since the end of the season, it's been, well, I'd say since March, it's been, hey, Deshaun Watson's dealing with a lot of legal issues. There was one story that came out that one of the women that were making allegations dropped her case. And a lot of that had to come because of the fact that everybody has to be named now. And I'm not going to get into the legal semantics of it all that time, but the reality is this. When the names got out there, I thought that maybe a couple of these cases might go away because it's basically what this woman said. She just didn't want her name out there. So that's not an admission that Watson didn't do something or something didn't happen to her. It's just an issue of she doesn't want her name where everybody knows about it. So there's that. Now, this story is about, I wrote on my blog a while back that the trade market for Deshaun Watson is dead. And then this comes out. From Mike Fisher from SI.com, he writes, the Philadelphia Eagles are trying to find a direction. So are the Houston Texans. And according to an NFL source, despite their various issues, the teams could still get together on a Deshaun Watson trade. Watson is, of course, buried in legal troubles that are completely separate from his trade request, a request that we know that general manager Nick Cassero grew increasingly amenable to until the flood of sexual assault charges against the star QB. Meanwhile, the Eagles are trying to straighten themselves out as well, having traded away Carson Wentz with a tentative plan to hand their QB job to Jalen Hurts, except that our source insists that Philadelphia's desire to secure Watson remains in place. Think about that for a minute. Remains in place. Now, I don't know much about Jalen Hurts as far as what his future is going to be in the NFL. I do know that he came in and provided a spark for the Eagles, but a lot of that had to do with his ability to run the ball instead of throwing it. And I think that that's going to be a big thing there when it comes to the Eagles. Do they feel confident enough to just hand the season to Hurts and then go from there? I don't know. But could they still be in the mix to get him? Now, there's going to be obviously the baggage that comes with Deshaun Watson. Yes, he's proven that he can make plays on the field. But it also, with the allegations that are against him, do you want that hanging over your franchise? That's a big deal too. So with that, I wanted to open up the phones to you on this. With Watson, possibly, maybe the Eagles are going to do it, according to this report from SI.com. You can read the full thing up on my blog page at foxsportsradio1400.com, by the way. Do you think that people are going to get over what has happened with Watson and move on from there? And then just say, all right, look, we're going to take this bump of bad publicity and then finish it, and then he's going to be our franchise quarterback. Because let's be honest, you don't have a lot of life-changing quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a handful. I mean, you've got Tom Brady, but he's 806. And, Aaron Rodgers, who's getting up there in age. Several other little things, other players that are out there. People are talking about Lamar Jackson's a guy. He's starting to establish himself up in Baltimore. But the reality is everybody's looking for that franchise quarterback. And Watson is a guy that has the potential that he can do that. Here's what I think is going to happen with Watson, in my opinion. It's going to go one of two ways. Either it's going to stretch out and he's going to be put on the commissioner's exempt list and he will not play this season. But if he does, I think what's going to happen is this. All of these 21 cases have been basically put into a class action lawsuit, if I'm reading things correctly. I think Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, is going to go to this guy, Tony Busby's office, and he's going to ask him for a nice round number. And I think they're going to try to settle it completely out of court. I think that's what's going to happen. I think that the 21 women that are in this thing, I think that if they sign off and they do it, I'm sure there'll be a hush clause in that. And literally, it'll be like it never happened except for Deshaun Watson's wallet. I think that's what's going to happen. Now, I'm not trying to say that either one thing happened or one thing didn't. I have no clue. And you know what? If you're running around thinking that you have a clue, you don't know either because you weren't in those rooms with him. Nobody was but him and the masseuse that's there. And as of right now, it's his word against theirs, their word against his. And until the police come out with, hey, this criminally happened and we are charging Deshaun Watson, these are all allegations that are of a civil nature. Simple as that. Edwin with a comment online, until he's convicted of something, not saying there's no substance, but what has been proven, why should he be guilty before proven innocent? Yes, you can have that argument too. And I think the women here should be taken, it should be taken seriously what they put out there. Absolutely should. But the reality is that this can't stretch out forever, first of all. And I think that eventually something's going to be probably done where we won't know what happened. We just won't know. And I think that people are going to have to be in the order that'll come out eventually. Things will be settled by both sides and everybody will have to be quiet. And the women that this happened to, they've probably learned, hey, don't get yourself into where something like this can happen to you again. And the same thing for Watson. Don't let this happen to you. And more so on the Watson side, the women there, I mean, it's not their fault if this happened. It's kind of silly the way that I just said that there. Blake said, I think he's going to have to post bail. He has to be charged with a criminal charge, sir. I don't understand why people don't get that. He has to be charged with a criminal charge before there's anything resembling going to jail and having to post bail. I mean, it's silly when you really stop and think about that. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832 is the number to call. If you want to talk about that, if you want to talk about Frank Martin staying. By the way, one of the interesting things about the press conference today, they played a video with former Gamecock players all saying, hey, guess what? We're proud of Frank Martin, Sindarius Thornwell, Mike Kotsar, Dwayne Notice, there were a couple of other players, and they were all just excited that Frank Martin's leading the program. So there's that. And Martin just said, hey, this is why I coach. This is why I do this. I think next year's team, if A.J. Watson comes back and you've got Frank, who was getting more comfortable towards the end of the season, if you got those guys and the guys that are coming in addition to Cousinard, and let's just say Seventh Woods comes back, you're going to have some good guards. Keyshawn Bryant is good too. Just saying. Gamecocks could be intriguing next year. Now, I'm going to save you some time here. The SEC beat writers, they're going to pick the Gamecocks to finish dead last. That's just the way that they are. Which amuses me when South Carolina fans and fans of schools that are not, LSU, Alabama, or whatever, they're all like SEC, but then the SEC folks always think that they're going to be hot dog water. They never really look at them. Just saying, it's out there. Still chant, though. SEC. More of the rundown when we get back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. I don't know about Matt Gates. I read the thing about TJ Moss. I think he'll be good there. I think I read something where, who was it? the former Clemson guard was transferring to UNC Greensboro. And then, yeah, not so much. Hold on. I don't like, and you guys can, people get mad at me when I say this, but until you've been proven guilty in a court of law, it's kind of hard for me to say, hey, you're guilty. But I can hold assumptions about you. And what I mean by that is that this is the perfect example for that. You've got Michael Jackson was never convicted of molesting children. Never convicted. Would you let your kids hang out with Michael Jackson? The answer for me is hell no. Hell no. I mean, that's not happening at all. So it's perception. But I do agree with your perception on people can change. Like this stuff with Watson, man, and I'm gonna be honest, when we covered him when he was here, he was put over like he was a choir boy, and everybody loved him and everything else. But I wouldn't have a problem, like, walking out of a room or whatever and leaving my daughters in a room. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Now I kind of would. Brandon, you don't know if she did that. Technically, she wasn't convicted, sir. But yeah, that's a good point there, Brandon, too. Very good point. It's down to 21, Jerome. Got to keep up, brother. Got to keep up. One already dropped her case. Final segment of the rundown this afternoon. Out to the phones we go. Ray joins us on the program. Ray, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Rob. Well, you kind of got my interest when you were talking about the our basketball team, and you did. If all them players come back right, could be a good, surprisingly, really good team. And you said that the conference would have South Carolina dead last. You're exactly right. I mean, I'll tell you.
People get mad at me when I say that, but South Carolina could return 5 McDonald's All-Americans, and they still would have them picked next to last or dead last. The people that vote in a lot of these polls are absolutely, they just don't care. If it's not Alabama or one of the blue bloods from the SEC, I don't care what people say. That's just the way that it is every single year, especially in basketball.
Oh, you're exactly right. And heck, they promote Vanderbilt over us. I can tell you, just to give you an example, it was back during the Lou Holtz era, and I don't know if it was Andre Goodman or it was the guy that played with him, and he was a real good safety defensive back.
Right.
Well, we all couldn't believe he didn't make first team All SEC. It was just amazing. But then, guess what? He makes first team All American. And I'm like, you're getting gypped by your own conference when you got a player who doesn't make all conference but makes first team All American. I mean, that just tells you how slanted things are towards those SEC blue blood schools. Which you're right. If it's Bama, Auburn, LSU, Florida,
on that front, yeah. It's
Tennessee,
that way with football, yeah, and then basketball, it's kind of the same way. Now on the baseball side, since South Carolina won those 2 national titles, a lot of things slant towards the Gamecocks. I mean, it's just the way that it is, and it's almost like a name recognition thing, and people are going to look at it from the perspective of, oh, this is going to be they play here and they're great, and they don't really do their research. I mean, that's just the way that it is. So
it truly is, especially in the SEC. But I decided to chime in. Thanks a lot, Rob.
All right, appreciate it, buddy. You're always welcome to join the program. Yeah, and I'm not knocking all of those folks. I'm just saying when I look at a lot of those polls, and we'll talk about them here, but the reality is that a lot of them come up flat, in my opinion. They really do. Some notes from the chat room. I was talking during the break with them about perception's a big thing with Deshaun Watson, and I use the adage of Michael Jackson and how Michael Jackson was a guy that was never convicted of doing any wrong with children. But would you leave your children with him? For me, the answer is no. And of course, the chat room goes off into a tangent. Brandon says Casey Anthony wasn't convicted either, even though she did it. And he also brings up O.J. Simpson, Aaron Hernandez. That's over the top. Ray Lewis. Yeah, I mean, there's high profile cases that are out there. We were talking about basketball there for a minute. Blake says, I'd be very surprised to see Alabama basketball maintain the success they had this year. They're getting better players. I mean, if you look at the recruiting class, I think they got like a top 10 player going to Alabama to play basketball. That doesn't happen very often. Yeah, Alabama's getting some players. They're going to be I don't necessarily agree with the style of play that Nate Oates does. I think that shooting threes like that and just running and gunning can work for a while, but when it comes down to it, it's the same thing. If you can't hit threes, you end up, someone can bite you. And when you get bit in March, it's over. You can win 27 games and lose 3 games. But then that fourth one you lose in, the second week of March, that's the one that matters the most. I tell you what, Edwin needs to come do this show with me because he had a great point. Gimmicks run out. Gimmicks run out. That's exactly right. And, you look back at, I remember the Arkansas team that Nolan Richardson had. The big difference with them, they ran a lot. And, remember the old 40 minutes of hell thing? People thought that was a gimmick, but that's different, though. Because the defense that they played, they were inside your jersey the entire game. And they pressured you the entire game. And the mentality is that with 10 minutes left to go in the game, we're going to be fresh and you're going to be tired. And then we're going to beat you senseless. That's completely different. I'm going to have bigger, longer, stronger athletes than you've got. I'm going to mold them into a good team, and then we'll go from there. And we're going to pressure you. And if you can't handle the pressure, then it's not going to work out well for you. Simple as that. Gee, Bama Boy says, Nate Oates will be a problem for everyone. The talent on that team is very elite. Yeah, he's getting good players. That's not that far-fetched at all. Not far-fetched at all. South Carolina plays on the road at LSU tonight. LSU not exactly having the best baseball season. I've talked with some folks that are down there in the Bayou. They are not very happy with what's going on with LSU. It's not like it's one of those things where if I told you it's South Carolina and LSU in baseball, you're going to be like, okay, that could be pretty good. But you peel back their records a little bit, and LSU's not really having the best of seasons. They really aren't. Now, South Carolina, are they peaking at the right time? Picked up that series win over Mizzou, held serve at home with Charleston Southern. Can they keep it moving with the series at LSU this weekend? Winning at LSU is never easy. I don't care how far down the tube the Tigers are. Winning down there is not easy. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call. Tom says the Gamecocks are going to Omaha. We should book it. I'm just going to bet the stuff that I've invested in my Dogecoin. Yeah, that's okay. And he says one day closer to his Pats getting their franchise quarterback. Okay. I don't know. I don't think the Patriots are going to take a quarterback in the draft. It's just my opinion. We shall see. I don't know. They may trade for somebody. The crazy thing is somebody else wrote this the other night, and I almost wrote something up about it, but in the end, wouldn't it be an interesting thing if, when the smoke settles, Deshaun Watson ends up with the New England Patriots? What? Yeah, there's talk about him going to the Eagles. You think the Patriots wouldn't be interested? Okay. Tom says that Fields, Mack, or Lance, whichever falls to them. Okay. Or Kellen Mond. I don't know about Kellen Mond. We'll see. We'll definitely see on that. All right. So with that, man, we've had a great episode of the show. You're always welcome to join us on the phones at 803-978-1832. We are wrapping up the program today. We got to make way for Clemson Sports Talk. Yes, with Lawton Swan.
Stop looking at me, Swan.
Yes, he will join us to talk with us about everything Clemson and, everything else. He's always got some good stuff there. One other note, spring game has been set up now for 15,000 fans. So that's for the South Carolina game this weekend. So have some people actually in Williams-Brice Stadium. That's a pretty good thing. So 15,000 fans at Williams-Brice Stadium. I'm sure Gamecock fans will pack it out, in my opinion, for the chance to see Shane Beamer and his new squad as they wrap up spring practice with the spring game this weekend. My name is Rob Sanders. I'm on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good. Feel free to follow me there. The full story on Deshaun Watson possibly going to the Philadelphia Eagles is up on the blog page at foxsportsradio1400.com. Podcast will be up at 5 o'clock today. Be sure to check that out in case you missed any of the show. And I'm on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good. Follow my silliness there. Thanks for joining us on the show this afternoon. We'll be back at it tomorrow right here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, you guys rock, man. We'll see you later on. Have a good day, all right? My Braves suck, by the way. Just throwing that out there for knowledge. They're terrible.